They can guarantee $16 billion in tax concessions for property investors, but they can't guarantee a cent for public and affordable housing in the middle of the worst housing crisis we have seen in generations.
The Australian dream is slipping away. Once a land where owning a home was part of the national identity, Australia is now grappling with a housing crisis that's impossible to ignore. Skyrocketing prices and unaffordable rents are dominating the conversation, leaving even homeowners worried about how their children will ever step into the market. What was once seen as a struggle for the disadvantaged has grown into a crisis affecting everyone, including essential workers who keep society running. How did it come to this? Why has housing become so unattainable, and what does it mean for the future of Australia? In this video, we'll dive into the roots of the crisis, its impact, and whether there's a way out. But before we start, here's a little question to entertain you. What is the Australian dream most commonly associated with? A. Owning a home. B. Traveling the world. C. Starting a business. D. Winning the lottery. Write your answer in the comments and patiently watch this video till the end to find out the truth. And we dive in. Chapter 1. The Lucky Country. Australia's recent economic journey is quite remarkable. In the 1960s, the nation earned the nickname the Lucky Country due to its rich reserves of natural resources such as iron ore, coal, copper, gold, and oil. This wealth has fueled its economic growth, primarily through the export of these resources to rapidly growing markets in Asia, particularly China. However, having an abundance of natural resources can sometimes be a double-edged sword. It can lead to an economy that relies heavily on commodity exports, which may inflate the value of the national currency. This inflation can make other exports less competitive and hinder the development of more sophisticated industries. Additionally, economies overly reliant on commodities often face issues like corruption and inequality, as political leaders may form close ties with resource industries and fail to distribute the wealth generated from exports fairly, resulting in a concentration of wealth among a few industrialists. This situation is often referred to as Dutch disease, and it helps explain the stagnation seen in many developing nations, including those in Africa and the oil-rich countries of the Middle East. Nevertheless, Australia seems to have sidestepped the most severe impacts of Dutch disease. Its relatively stable political environment has enabled better redistribution of national income and has supported the growth of its domestic economy, even if it lacks a sovereign wealth fund akin to Norway's. The Australian economy has thrived over the past few decades due to a solid export foundation, combined with a relatively strong domestic market. From 1991 until the onset of the pandemic in 2020, Australia enjoyed uninterrupted GDP growth for every quarter, marking the longest such streak in global history. This resilient domestic economy enabled Australia to navigate the Asian financial crisis in the late 1990s, which severely impacted Japan, its largest trading partner. Additionally, a surge in commodity prices fueled by Chinese demand helped Australia weather the 2008 financial crisis. Currently, Australia ranks 10th in the world for GDP per capita, with its citizens among the wealthiest globally. The UBS Global Wealth Report highlights that Australia boasts the 5th highest mean wealth and the 2nd highest median wealth, trailing only the small nation of Luxembourg. Unlike many other economies that have faced wage stagnation since 2008, Australian incomes have continued to rise, increasing by approximately 15% from 2008 to 2022. The combination of a thriving economy and a welcoming, sunny environment has made Australia a top destination for immigrants. The country consistently records some of the highest immigration rates among developed nations, contributing to GDP growth and shielding Australia from demographic challenges. But beneath this facade of prosperity lies a growing crisis, one that's quietly eroding the foundations of the Australian dream. Hidden Discovery needs your help. Subscribe to our channel and give this video a like so YouTube can promote it to more viewers. And now we move on. Chapter 2. The Australian Dream. The notion of urging young people to purchase homes and build wealth over time has positioned Australians as the 4th wealthiest population globally. However, the housing market is experiencing a surge. The median house price skyrocketed from just under $500,000 in 2011 to nearly $1 million by 2024, while wages have stagnated. Australia is a vast nation, comparable in size to the United States minus Alaska, yet it boasts only 5 major cities. Sydney and Melbourne alone represent 40% of the entire population. Along with Adelaide, these cities rank among the top 10 least affordable in the world, where home prices exceed 10 times the average annual income. Consequently, more individuals are turning to renting. It's not unusual to see long lines of prospective renters waiting for property viewings, with dozens of people often gathered for inspections. This overwhelming demand is driving rents to unprecedented levels, pushing the dream of homeownership even further out of reach for many Australians. In the Western world, the housing market is facing significant challenges. However, Australia stands out with a unique situation. The demand for rental properties is extraordinarily high. Historically, Australia excelled in affordability, boasting a high homeownership rate and fewer disadvantaged areas. Yet, this landscape is beginning to shift. In the 1950s, Australia was thriving. The nation boasted some of the highest living standards globally, and its economy was on the rise. This era saw the emergence of the Great Australian Dream, which centered around the aspiration to own a standalone house on a quarter-acre lot in the suburbs, complete with a garden and a Holden, the quintessential Australian vehicle. With cars becoming more affordable and a growing desire for space, Australian cities began to expand. Today, Melbourne sprawls 6 times larger than London, yet has a smaller population. Sydney's situation is even more pronounced, being 14 times the size of Berlin, but with only 2 million more residents. The government encouraged homeownership through initiatives like the First Homeowner Grant, which proved effective. Home ownership rates soared from 52% in 1950 to a peak of 71% in 1968. While similar trends occurred in other nations, Australia led the way. The Great Australian Dream embodies the belief that owning a home equates to a better, more prosperous life, a notion supported by government policies that kept housing accessible. Consequently, housing became a cornerstone of the Australian lifestyle, with homes once being remarkably affordable and ownership rates high. However, this situation has drastically changed, turning housing into a contentious political issue. Politicians and commentators provide various explanations that align with their agendas, especially with the upcoming 2025 elections intensifying the debate. Chapter 3. The Reality. Let's talk about the people who keep everything running: nurses, teachers, firefighters, and paramedics. These essential workers are the backbone of our communities, yet many of them are being forced out of the very cities they serve because of skyrocketing housing costs. This isn't just a personal inconvenience for them, it's a growing problem for society as a whole. Take nurses, for example. In Australia, the average nurse earns around 70,000 to 85,000 Australian dollars per year, depending on their experience and location. While that might sound like a decent income, consider this. The median house price in Sydney is over 1.2 million Australian dollars, while Melbourne isn't far behind at 900,000 Australian dollars. To buy a home in these cities, nurses would need to save for decades just to afford a deposit, all while juggling rent and rising living costs. Teachers face a similar struggle. With an average salary of 75,000 to 90,000 Australian dollars, they're working tirelessly to shape the future generation, yet most can't afford to live near the schools where they work. Renting isn't much better. The average weekly rent for a house in Sydney has surged past 700 Australian dollars, which means even a modest apartment can consume more than 30 to 40% of their income, well above the recommended limit for affordable housing. Firefighters and paramedics, who are crucial in emergencies, are also feeling the squeeze. Their average salaries, ranging between 60,000 and 80,000 Australian dollars, are no match for the housing market in urban areas. This forces many of them to live in outer suburbs or even rural areas, enduring commutes of an hour or more to get to work. Imagine the consequences in an emergency. A paramedic stuck in traffic, unable to reach someone in need because they simply couldn't afford to live closer to the city. The situation is dire. According to recent statistics, over 50% of essential workers in major Australian cities now live more than 20 kilometers from their workplaces, a number that continues to grow as housing becomes more unaffordable. These long commutes not only affect their quality of life, but also put additional strain on public transport and road systems. But let's take a step back and consider where things began to go awry. Chapter 4. Awakening. In the 1980s, there was a significant change in priorities. The perspective shifted from viewing housing as a basic human right to treating it as a profit-driven investment. The government encouraged individuals to purchase second homes and list them for rent, which attracted more investors into the market. This surge in investment heightened demand, consequently driving up prices. The impact of these policies on housing is a topic of debate, particularly among left-leaning critics. They argue that such incentives encourage individuals to take out loans to compete with those simply seeking a home to live in, leading to a substantial distortion in housing prices. However, this issue is part of a broader context. The past decade has been quite tumultuous. Interest rates fell dramatically, aimed at fostering economic growth and controlling inflation. During the pandemic, rates plummeted to nearly zero, making it easier for people to secure loans for homes, which further fueled demand and escalated prices. Additionally, the government invested billions in initiatives designed to assist low- and middle-income families in purchasing their first homes. While this support benefited many Australians, it also contributed to increased demand. The situation becomes problematic when demand outstrips supply, which is precisely what occurred. The number of government-funded public housing units constructed has plummeted from a high of 20,000 in 1978 to a mere 3,000 by 2023. These homes are designed for individuals with low incomes, providing a crucial safety net against homelessness. While the demand for such housing has been on the rise, government funding has seen a significant downturn. Additionally, an increasing amount of bureaucratic red tape has further impeded construction efforts. These regulations severely restrict the private sector's ability to contribute. Moreover, one of Australia's pressing issues is that the majority of demand is concentrated in inner-city areas where job opportunities, schools, and infrastructure are most accessible. However, local opposition often arises against plans for high-density housing, leading to protests. The common sentiment is that while many desire more housing, they prefer it to be built elsewhere. Compounding these challenges are ongoing supply chain disruptions and a shortage of available workers. These factors put together resulted in insufficient supply, thus higher prices. Chapter 5. Immigration. Take a look at this chart. It illustrates the ratio between Australians born in Australia and those born abroad. It is noticeable that in some age groups, the number of migrants is nearly equal to the number of those born in the country. Over the past 2 years, Australia has welcomed an unprecedented influx of immigrants, leading to significant population growth primarily fueled by overseas migration. During the pandemic, this growth slowed dramatically to just 25,000, but by September 2023 it surged to a record high. Critics have raised concerns about this surge, arguing that it was reckless given the severe challenges facing the construction industry. The cost of building a home has soared by 40% compared to pre-pandemic levels, and supply chain issues have extended construction timelines by 18%. This imbalance between high demand and low supply has further driven up prices. While immigration can help address labor shortages in Australia, it also exacerbates existing domestic challenges. By 2024, the topic of immigration became increasingly contentious. The peak in immigration coincided with 5 consecutive quarters of declining GDP per capita, marking the longest downturn in Australia's history. Additionally, Australians faced record-high rent prices, contributing to a troubling long-term trend. In 1971, average house prices in major Australian cities, adjusted for inflation, were significantly lower. By 2024, these prices had more than quadrupled. This phenomenon is not unique to Australia, but the situation there is particularly severe. In 1987, the cost of a house was 2.8 times the average annual income, comparable to other nations. By 2019, this ratio had skyrocketed to 6.9 times, surpassing that of the US, Canada, and the UK. In 2023, the ratio of housing prices to annual income soared to 9.7 times, making it the second highest globally, just behind Hong Kong. The once attainable Australian dream of homeownership and building wealth is slipping further away. A full-time minimum wage worker now allocates an average of 68% of their earnings to rent, leaving little room to save for a home deposit. This trend is leading to a growing population of lifelong renters, while homeowners continue to amass significant wealth. There is a rising concern that this could lead to a divided society, pitting affluent homeowners against struggling renters. Chapter 6. Homeless Crisis. When people can't afford to put a roof over their heads, the effects ripple through every part of the community, creating challenges that go far beyond just finding a place to live. Let's start with mental health. Imagine working hard every day, only to realize that, no matter how much you save, you'll never be able to afford a home. For many Australians, this isn't just a passing worry, it's a constant source of stress and anxiety. Studies show that housing insecurity is one of the leading causes of depression and other mental health issues. Families in particular are feeling the pressure as parents struggle to provide stability for their kids in an environment where moving frequently has become the norm. Then there's the issue of homelessness. It's not just the visibly homeless, those sleeping rough on the streets, but also the hidden homeless, like families couch surfing or living in overcrowded conditions because they simply can't afford rent. Recent data reveals that over 116,000 Australians are homeless on any given night, and that number is rising. The sad reality is that many of these individuals were once part of the middle class, but escalating housing costs have pushed them into crisis. Communities themselves are being fractured. Longtime residents are being priced out of the neighborhoods they grew up in, forced to move further away from family, friends, and support networks. This displacement breaks down the sense of connection and belonging that makes a neighborhood feel like home. In some areas, entire communities are disappearing, replaced by high-rise developments that often remain unaffordable for locals. The crisis also hits the younger generation hard. Many millennials and Gen Z Australians have given up on the dream of homeownership altogether, resigned to a lifetime of renting, or worse, moving back in with their parents. This generational divide is creating tension, with younger people feeling shut out of opportunities their parents once took for granted. But it doesn't stop there. The housing crisis is also exacerbating inequality. Wealthier individuals who already own property are seeing their assets grow in value, while those who don't are falling further behind. This growing wealth gap creates resentment and fuels social division, making it harder for Australians to feel like they're all in it together. And let's not forget the economic impact. When people spend the majority of their income on rent or mortgages, they have less money to put back into the local economy. Businesses feel the pinch as spending slows, and the cycle of economic strain continues. The bottom line? This isn't just a housing crisis, it's a social crisis. It's changing the way Australians live, work, and connect with each other. If something doesn't change soon, the very essence of what makes communities thrive, stability, connection, and opportunity, could be lost. Chapter 7. Housing Crossroads. In 2025, elections are on the horizon. Prime Minister Albanese is prioritizing supply issues. In 2024, he unveiled a substantial $32 billion initiative aimed at tackling the housing crisis. The Edit Center initiative plans to construct 1.2 million new homes over the next 5 years. However, critics are raising eyebrows. They question the feasibility of building 1.2 million houses in Australia within such a short time frame, asking where the builders will come from. Meanwhile, the Reserve Bank of Australia has raised interest rates to levels reminiscent of 2011, making mortgages pricier and likely leading to decreased demand. The discussions surrounding tax incentives have reignited, as have conversations about immigration. The focus isn't solely on these individual issues. It's about finding a balance between supply and demand, which can be approached in various ways. One option is to reduce immigration, accepting the mixed outcomes that may follow, which could lower demand. Alternatively, revamping planning regulations could stimulate supply, albeit with its own set of consequences. It's neither feasible nor beneficial to encompass every factor in the housing debate. Consequently, politicians and commentators often distill these complex issues into a few key points that resonate with their constituents. This trend is evident globally, but Australia stands out for its dramatic shift from having one of the most affordable housing markets to one of the least accessible. Homeownership is deeply intertwined with national identity, perhaps more so than anywhere else. A recent survey posed the question, do you believe that owning a home is a fundamental aspect of the Australian lifestyle? An impressive 93% responded affirmatively. When asked if they were worried about their ability to purchase a home in their lifetime, 68% expressed varying degrees of concern, either a lot or a little. The responsibility now lies with politicians to persuade Australians on the best strategies to tackle this challenge. However, there seems to be a shared understanding among economists. In a recent survey, a majority advocated for relaxing planning regulations and increasing public housing availability. Additionally, there is backing for revising tax laws that encourage housing as an investment and reforming the way states levy taxes on properties. Now it's time to share the right answer to the question, what is the Australian dream most commonly associated with? A. Owning a home. B. Traveling the world. C. Starting a business. D. Winning the lottery. The correct answer is A. Owning a home. Chapter 8. Solutions. Now the big question is, how do we fix it? There's no single answer, but plenty of ideas are on the table, and each comes with its own set of challenges. One potential solution is increasing the supply of homes. Sounds simple, right? But building more houses isn't as easy as it seems. The government's $32 billion plan to construct 1.2 million homes in 5 years is ambitious. But critics are already pointing out a major flaw. Where are the builders? Australia is facing a skills shortage, and without enough workers, those homes could remain just an idea on paper. Then there's the issue of affordability. Some economists argue that the best way to bring prices down is to relax planning regulations. Streamlining the approval process could make it easier and faster to build homes. But this comes with trade-offs, like concerns over environmental impacts and community backlash. Another idea is increasing public housing. This would provide affordable options for people who are struggling the most. Public housing could offer stability to those at risk of homelessness or housing insecurity, but funding it would require political will and significant investment. What about taxes? Many experts suggest revising tax policies that make housing more appealing as an investment than as a place to live. Negative gearing and capital gains tax concessions are often blamed for driving up prices, and reforming these could help. However, any changes to tax laws are bound to face pushback, especially from investors who've benefited from the current system. Immigration is also part of the equation. Some argue that lowering immigration levels could ease demand for housing, but this approach has its downsides. Immigration fuels the economy and fills critical job shortages, so cutting back could create other problems. At the heart of all these ideas is one undeniable truth. Balancing supply and demand is key. That means building more homes while also ensuring they're accessible to everyday Australians, not just investors or high-income earners. It's a delicate balancing act, and one that requires cooperation between governments, developers, and the community. So, is there a solution? The truth is, it'll take more than just one. It's going to require bold decisions, innovative thinking, and a commitment to long-term change. But if we don't act now, the dream of owning a home in Australia could slip even further out of reach for millions. Thank you for exploring the hidden corners of Australia with us. Let us know in the comments what country we should cover next. And don't forget to check out more hidden discoveries on our channel.